to What Are You Doing Down Here? I'm Caretaker Ron.
Caretaker Matt.
And today's topic is going to be Dr. Sleep, the director's cut.
The only version that really matters.
Absolutely the only version that really matters. The theatrical version, while it was fine, we both saw it.
It's the exact same runtime as The Shining.
Yeah, we both really enjoyed it. Once the director's cut came out and it was viewed by both of us, it really ties everything together with the original movie, The Shining. It stays faithful to the book, but if you're telling me you didn't like Dr. Sleep and you haven't watched the director's cut, there's no reason for you to go on jawing about it. Just get the director's cut and watch it. It's a half hour longer, but all the footage in there gives it better flow, and it actually ties Dr. Sleep well more into the story of The Shining than the theatrical version did.
It's
makes
Mike
a lot more sense.
It's Mike Flanagan's vision of Dr. Sleep in relation to The Shining. He was forced to take stuff out to get it down to a specific runtime, and the stuff that he had to take out was stuff that deals with the backstory and more relation to how it relates to The Shining. He had to take that stuff out in order for the story to still make sense for the movie. But this director's cut is the complete story. This is how Mike Flanagan envisioned it. Just like Stanley Kubrick's Shining, there's nothing that was taken out of that other than the ending that he didn't want to show. He didn't take that ending out because someone told him to. He chose to. That was already on the reel, and they took it out of the film houses and burned it. So like Stanley Kubrick's film is exactly what Stanley wanted. The director's cut of Dr. Sleep is exactly what Mike Flanagan intended.
Yeah.
His version, and it's the complete version. It really ties everything together.
Yeah, it makes it, it takes it from, hey, that was a good movie, I'll remember it, to, oh crap, that was fantastic, let me watch that a couple more times.
It is now,
yeah,
Dr. Sleep
it's in rotation.
Well, Dr. Sleep is to The Shining as It Chapter 2 is to It Chapter 1. It's the second half of the story.
Yeah.
You have to see the second half of the story. That's how it is to me. It's not a, well, maybe it's a sequel. No, it's the second half. It's the second half that it took Stephen King, 30 years to write the book?
Yep.
But once he did, we got to know the second half of the story.
Yeah. And at the same time, I don't know that the book was that essential, but people were asking for it, so it came out.
I think it was just Stephen King wanting to do it.
Yeah.
He wanted to go back and
give it closure.
Yeah, and address how Danny Torrance grew up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the book is great, but it's not the movie. The movie is different, just like The Shining is different than the book.
It had to be because The Shining, the movie by Stanley Kubrick, exists.
Yeah.
And you cannot do a film that's a sequel to something that has any connotation with Stanley Kubrick without doing it justice.
You can't.
You
if
cannot
you don't show the visuals,
pay homage to the master.
If the Overlook doesn't look like it looks in that movie, people are going to be complaining the whole time, and they're going to be like, "This isn't the Overlook."
If it doesn't exist.
Well, but even if he got his
way, platform
way,
with Jack waving,
right? But even if he got his way, and there was an Overlook there, but it is, what are you going to do? Make the TV Overlook? You can't do the TV version. So you have to convince Stephen King that I need to show the visuals from Stanley Kubrick's movie, but I'm going to do it justice. I'm going to bring these characters back. You will
and
trust me.
He did.
Yeah.
For everybody's benefit. So the story starts out basically in Florida, 1980.
Just after the events of the
Just
Overlook.
after the Overlook. It's probably the springtime.
May, maybe?
Yeah. May, well, it's not probably. It is definitely springtime at some point in time, but it's only months after the Overlook Hotel happened. And we basically find the true knot, who are the
villains.
They're the villains. They're chasing people who have the Shining. They're something that we did not know existed, and they get a little girl.
Pseudo-vampire in a way. They feed off of whatever gives these people with the Shining their power. They feed off of that.
Yes. And
that somehow prolongs their lives in a way to, like a vampire, where they're able to live for centuries off of this. So they're not immortal, but they're kind of immortal in that they can keep going as long as they're sustaining themselves with the steam from
the people who shine.
Right. So
which is interesting enough. It's more akin to his characters in Dark Tower. It's more of a fantasy
Right.
adventure
Sure.
portion, but then
You're expanding on the idea of what The Shining is.
Yes.
You're saying there's more to it than just telepathy or visions.
Yeah.
There's more to it. She's able to heal herself, and you go much further into this world than what we knew existed based off the first movie,
Absolutely.
or even the first book. So there's important scenes throughout this movie that is what I think we should focus on in this review is the completion of the Shining story in regards to the movie The Shining, and now Dr. Sleep being the conclusion. There's certain things that tie these movies together. So we'll focus on those scenes because those are the powerful scenes that really show what Mike Flanagan was trying to do with this story and how he thought this will conclude The Shining and even add to The Shining. Those of us, I would never thought that you could add to that story. To add on to something that a master's already done,
pretty much perfect.
That's hard to
in
do.
our point of view.
Right. So the first scene is where Danny is sitting on the park bench and Dick Halloran appears to him. Very crucial scene because not only does Dick explain the idea of the box to him and how he can capture the ghosts from the Overlook that have been following him since they left and kind of imprison them so that they can't torture him anymore. Not only does it show that, but it touches upon Danny's mental state after they left the hotel. He says a line, "Daddy tried to kill me." And he says it with such sincerity that it makes you feel for this little kid who is still unable to put his mind around the fact that his own father was trying to murder him.
And it's the first time that that's a cut that's in the director's cut.
Specifically
they cut
in the
it out
director's
for
cut.
some reason in
Yeah.
the theatrical version, but that's the first touch upon what plenty of dialogue that happens later where it was a real situation and you've got Danny saying, yeah, Daddy tried to kill me, so yeah, he realizes everything that happened, but it also kind of gives you the idea that he can't understand why that happened because maybe some things happened in the past, definitely.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
you know,
his dad hurt him when he was younger. It broke his arm. Danny knows that. It's not like he's forgotten it. But he's also has moved on to the point where where that didn't become a thing that completely ruined his relationship with his father. They were still a family unit when they got there. So that is why he's so baffled and unable to register why his father tried to kill him.
yeah, yeah.
Despite what he saw that happened at the hotel. Danny witnessed all of that. He saw it coming before it happened.
He saw it before, during,
And is still
after.
surprised and still unable to deal with the fact that his father tried to kill him. Because there still is love between the son and the father and the family in general. We're seeing it at the end of the road when they get to that hotel. They're hanging on by a thread. Jack is white knuckling it through sobriety, which anyone that knows, that's not easy to do. So every little thing is going to be a trigger. But back to that scene, it is how we learn about the box.
The box.
And putting the ghost in the
storing
box.
away every bad bit of memory, but also actually quasi-physically taking the ghosts and the apparitions and just they're
gone.
trapped away in a
Yeah.
box. They're gone. They're in the back of his file cabinets in these caskets
Yeah.
that Dick had figured out how to build.
Right.
And
Which he tells
so
him through a story of his grandfather. But
Yes.
yes, you're able to put this thing away, and now it can't hurt you, and it's locked away
Yeah.
because it's in your mind.
And it's key to the story.
Yeah.
Really. It comes back later. From there, we kind of the more important parts is we just flash forward to Danny as an adult.
An adult, right?
And there are some flashbacks back and forth between adulthood and childhood, but Danny as an adult,
Specifically between him and his mom.
as an adult, he's gone right down to rock bottom.
He's followed his father.
He's followed his father. He's drinking. He's out there. There's violence. He's just basically turned into what his father was.
Would have been if not
would
for
have
family.
been if not for the family.
The family is what
Exactly.
kind of holds Jack together.
Yeah.
It keeps him functioning. a
gives
functioning
him a
alcoholic.
reason to actually live.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So, and then we get another scene of Dick in there, and Dick is kind of Danny's good angel, the one on his shoulder saying, "Hey, you don't want to take her money. She's like half dead, on the bed." And so Dick is there as like moral support, keeping Danny
And he's
as straight and narrow as he could be, because he knows that he doesn't have the family to keep them together. He has no reason, basically, not to be.
He's teetering on the brink of falling into the abyss and not coming out. And Danny ends up taking the money and ends up leaving, and then we find out that the girl has died. In a later scene, Danny is laying in his bed when he finally gets to the small town that he goes to. He sees these black flies, the death flies, and so when he sees that, he realizes something's going on, and he rolls over, and there she is, and she says, "They haven't found us yet." Danny walked out on her and her toddler, maybe 2 years old, and he sets the toddler on the bed and then leaves with the money, and they die. Both of them die.
Yeah.
And so
that's pretty much where we see Danny hitting rock bottom.
That is rock bottom.
That's rock bottom. He knows it.
Is now these two people have died. Now, whether that girl was already dead in the bed, we don't know that, because he doesn't check for vitals or anything. So we're only led to believe that she is alive, because why would you leave the kid there if she's already dead?
Yeah.
But again, here we are.
Oh, there
she has died.
Yeah.
You know, so Danny is forced to confront his demons now, and this is when he realizes he needs help and goes into AA with his friend who vouched for him and helped get his life back on track.
Yeah, well, he moves out, goes to
that little town in
Vermont or New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Which paralleling The Shining, there's a tiny little town in the little town, kind of like the maze in The Shining that Jack looks upon them. Doesn't really come into play, but I just thought it's kind of an interesting thing. It's in the book as well. He meets Billy.
And Billy gets his life back on track. Because Billy is also an alcoholic.
Yeah.
But he is in the program. He is in AA. And he convinces Danny, actually right here, convinces him. Danny comes to him and says, "I need help." And that's where he gets into AA.
Yep.
So then we start to see Danny in AA, which is very important because it's the same thing his father did. But the next crucial scene is the 8 years sober scene.
That's a very, it's very sad that they cut
some of it.
Some of that.
That scene was shorter in the theatrical. It's only shorter by a minute or two because that speech.
But that's a minute or two of the speech.
That speech isn't very long to begin with.
Important to the redemption of Jack Torrance.
He addresses in the speech his father and how he didn't know his father very well because he died when he was 5. But it wasn't until Danny grew up and became a man that he got to know his dad in a different way. When he started to drink and became like his father, an alcoholic, that's when he learned more about his dad and how his dad was, because all of those things that were in Jack are in Danny. The violence and the anger and the temper and all of that, that's all in him. So he began to know his father better through that. But he also learned of his father in a different way because he remembers his dad going to AA meetings. He remembers him holding a 5-month ship and wanting to get better for his mom and for him. Jack was going to these meetings and he was trying. And that's a very crucial part of the story, because it's the only time we have been told that Jack was trying.
Yeah.
Now in The Shining, they say 5 months. He hasn't had an alcohol in 5 months. They acknowledge that he's dry and that he hasn't had any alcohol. But it's almost not in jest. It's this point of contention in the movie because
5 miserable months on the leg.
He's past the point
and
of
it
trying.
happened 3 goddamn years ago.
Right. He's past the point of trying. Whereas in this, we see Danny recollecting his father at that meeting and him actually trying. And that's very important because like
that
you said,
is something,
the redemption
that is
of Jack
something
Torrance
that really happened. It puts it in there that he did not start off nuts. He might have been at the end of his rope, but he was not completely insane in the interview.
No,
which is what
he's
I've heard
holding
a lot
on.
of people say.
But the fact that his father was trying, this fills in the gaps that we don't get in The Shining. We don't get the Jack trying. We get the Jack as he's basically almost
Overtaken.
done.
He's
trying.
he's at the end of his rope, and the hotel sees that as an easy way to get in because emotionally he's a train wreck, and maybe the emotions are what
and blames his wife
possessions for
where he's at in life.
Yeah,
looks at her and says, "You're the reason I'm here.
Yeah.
If not for you, I would be an accomplished author. I would be." He would be dead in a gutter if not for her. Yeah. But he sees it as she's the reason I'm being held back. But the important thing is...
That's the alcohol.
Right. The important thing is Danny getting sober and actually being able to function, and then addressing his father in this speech and saying that Dad was trying. And so he's like, and he would have wanted nothing more than to be where I am right now, 8 years sober. So he ends it with saying, like, this is for Jack Torrance. Like, that gives you a lot more to Jack's character by just Danny's approach to his father and how he sees his dad. That he, even despite all of the bad things, he still remembers his father trying, which is important because that adds to Jack's character. We get a lot of Wendy, we get a lot of Danny, obviously, but the one character that as you've said, in The Shining that people critique is Jack's character. That guy was already crazy. This gives us that backstory and fills it in that no, this guy was trying. He just failed.
Yeah,
he failed it.
He failed
at trying to get.
If they never went to the hotel, he wouldn't have.
Who
failed.
knows what happens? He could have failed and gone back to being an alcoholic. He could have fallen off the wagon.
Truly,
in real, not through the hotel. Yeah. He could have actually fallen off the wagon. This was his last hope at some sort of a stable job to where he could, and what better way than to put yourself where you're snowed in, you can't get the alcohol. That's a forced sober
if only
right
it
there.
weren't for those pesky ghosts.
Right. So as we go through the movie and Danny is getting better, at the same time we're seeing the development of a character called Abra, which we haven't really touched on.
Yeah, and Abra comes in and she's basically a kid.
She's basically Danny.
At Danny's level, she's probably has a lot more shine to her than Danny.
She's probably the most powerful that we know of.
And we just get to know her, and then it's kind of the side story to the story that we're getting at. But the True Knot senses her because she's so powerful, that they have to go after her, and she contacts Danny here and there through a chalkboard.
And she thinks that Danny is her imaginary friend, just as Danny thought Tony, which was The Shining, thought that was an imaginary friend.
Which is interesting because does that mean that there was a Tony out there? Who knows?
Who knows? That's the part we don't get, is we don't know what Tony really was. Was it just his way of interpreting The Shining? Whereas in her case, Abra's case, there was actually a person on the other end. Because she even says, I thought for a long time you were an imaginary friend. When she's much younger, and she's, like you said, writing on the chalkboard and stuff. But we're seeing Abra come forward in this story as she develops her powers, and the big crucial scene that happens involving Abra is when the baseball player, the little boy, is taken.
Yes.
There's a very critical scene there because that's the first time we actually see what these people do. The little girl, we don't see it. They just all kind of swarm, and then she's gone.
Yeah.
We are forced to watch these people do what they do to children.
And
in that
effective.
scene. And it is
very effective.
Gut-wrenching. That little kid that played that baseball player, I have not seen true acting to where that kid looked like they were actually doing that to him. I would have believed that unquestioned, that he was actually being stabbed.
Yeah, and that is another one where if you put it side by side with the theatrical cut, they cut from that.
They did.
And the director's cut is... they didn't add any much more graphic stuff, but that scene, they may have added 30 seconds to it, but
when he says, "Are you going to hurt me?"
Yes.
And she says, "Yes." And that scream he unleashes after that.
The scream,
oh my
when
God.
they're doing whatever they are, and there's blood that comes up, but just her, yes. It's so
filled with joy.
It's so horrifying.
Her saying yes in a joyful way, because obviously, as she says, pain purifies the steam. But to them, there's nothing wrong with taking joy in your work, I guess. They're not reluctantly doing this.
They do a great job.
We only have to do this to live. No, they are taking joy in it. But that is a very crucial scene because we see how powerful Abra is in that she's able to see this from 1,000 miles away. She's on the East Coast and this is in Iowa. And she sees it as though she's there. And Rose the Hat sees her seeing them. And that is the first time. Well, there's a time where she drops the spoons and Rose gets a win. But this is the first time that Rose is aware of this girl that she's actually there. Not just a presence or a feeling. She sees her and realizes this kid's looking in from 1,000 miles away. This kid is more powerful than anything we've ever dealt with. So then they become, they go on the hunt.
Now, when Billy gets killed, is that when the earthquake happens?
No, Billy gets killed post-earthquake.
Post-earthquake.
Because the earthquake is her seeing the boy die out there.
Yeah. Oh, not Billy. I replaced Billy with the kid.
Oh, yes.
When the kid dies,
the baseball player is when
the earthquake happens.
Yes, when she screams and the parents come running in, that's the earthquake.
Yeah.
That they read about later in the director's cut. They only mention that in the director's cut.
Yeah, which is just more further proof of how powerful Abra's shine is.
Right, and it shows how Rose is able to get to her.
How they're able
she
to
comes to her that night.
Yeah.
She's not just flying in the sky. She knows where she's at based off of this news story.
The guy from Sons of Anarchy. He figures he figures it out.
The
seismic activity.
Yeah, so that's probably the next really important scene because there's like Ron said, there's flashbacks of Danny and his mother, and at some point we see a flashback of Danny putting the girl in the naked lady in the box, the lady from room 237. She gets put in the box. She's the first one. So we start to see him putting these things in his box. But then there's also flashbacks of Danny sitting on the couch with his mom and his mom looking at him and then looking away, and she realizes that, or she doesn't realize, all she's seeing is Jack because of Danny's eyes. And Danny realizes every time his mother's looking at him that she's seeing his father, and it's hurting her. So he goes into the bathroom and he's able to change his eyes from whatever kind of brownish they are, he's able to change them into blue so that his mom will never see his father again. That is not in the director's cut. And that's an important thing because Ewan McGregor does not have the same color eyes as the boy that played Danny in The Shining. So that's an important thing to address. Now you could just ignore it and be like, well, and maybe people won't notice.
The theatrical cut, watching it, when we were in the movies, we were watching it in the theater, and it's just like, well, that's never explained.
Right.
Like, it was always in the back of my head. Like,
right. It's just that, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
But so that's something that happens throughout the course of this, where we've gotten to in the story, is Danny using The Shining, and I think he says it's the last time he used it, was to change his eyes so that his mom would not see his father every time because he could see that it was hurting
him. And he also uses The Shining, or he also uses alcohol in order to control The Shining, to keep
dull
it down.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of important because The Shining is more of an emotive thing.
So, due to how much is involved in Dr. Sleep, aka sequel to The Shining, aka the second part, there's so much to cover in this movie because we will keep talking about it and The Shining in the same breath. We're going to have to break this up into parts. So this ends part 1 of Dr. Sleep. Tune in next time for part 2. Caretaker Matt?
Caretaker Ron.
What are you doing down here?